Here we go. It says I am live. Good evening, guys. Yeah, we are live. My computer is playing silly buggers as usual. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to Live and Undrugged Series 4, Episode 3. Tonight we are with Duncan, Bhaskran Brown, who's going to share a bit about his story, his experience, strength and hope, and hopefully give some great insight into our world. Thanks for coming on, mate.
It's all right. I'm looking forward to having a bit of a chat.
Yeah, that'd be great. So let's go back to the start of your story, mate, and go from there.
So I think it all dates back to one specific event in my childhood. I was in school and the teacher said, I want you to write a poem. Now, I know that that is the kind of instruction that fills the average schoolboy with terror, but I was quite excited about it because I was quite into Shakespeare at the time. I was one of the cool kids, you can tell. And I wrote this poem and I was pretty pleased with it. And I thought it was really, really good. And I took it up to the teacher, showed it to the teacher, really excited. He took one look at it and went, well, your handwriting's really scruffy. You've spelled all those words wrong. The commas are in the wrong places, and your punctuation, it just stinks. And I was like, yeah, but I mean, surely the point of writing is actually to write something worth reading. The spelling and the grammar and the handwriting, that's just presentation. Surely the fact that I've written something that involves alliteration and consonants and imagery and metaphor, surely that's far more important. And the teacher said, Duncan, see me after school. And all right, that wasn't the moment that shattered my belief in life or anything, but I think it does kind of demonstrate what my schooling experience was like. It felt very much was not designed for me to be successful. What I wanted from it and what my teachers wanted from me were two totally different things. So I found it very, very difficult to find my place when I was a kid. I found it very difficult to find any kind of success when I was young. So I I look back on it now and I think it's quite obvious that I had a pretty unhealthy relationship with food. I mean, nobody said that at the time. It was just, well, like, of course you like dairy milk. You're a kid. All kids like dairy milk, don't they? I just took it a bit too far. And then as I got older, I discovered other things and I discovered alcohol. I realized that was just a bigger hammer for that particular nail. And, when I was trying to impress girls, there was a lot of social anxiety. Again, I didn't really quite know where I fit in with all of that sort of stuff. And when I started drinking, it seemed like all of my Christmases had come at once. So it just seemed to solve all of my problems. And when I started off, I was drinking at the weekend. I was drinking as much as I could, but still, I wasn't drinking all of the time. So it didn't seem like I was drinking that much, didn't seem like it was that much of a problem. But time went on, and what I noticed as my drinking career progressed was that the amount of people I was drinking with went down, and the amount that I was drinking went up. And I, of course, took it to its logical conclusions and just ended up in my flat on my own, drinking a couple of bottles of wine most nights. And I am very skeptical of those kind of like 4 a.m. staring in the mirror stories because I think that all change happens gradually over a period of time. But I found myself staring in the mirror at 4 a.m. one day, looking at myself, asking myself what I wanted from life. And my wife and I, we were trying to start a family, and she'd had a miscarriage, which was, I mean, that was really, really hard. It was terribly hard on her, um, both physically and emotionally. But also, I just was not there for her. I did not know what to do. I didn't know how to help her. All I really knew how to do was drink. So all I did was just disappear off into the bottle, and that was of absolutely no use. And I never really framed it in exactly that way, but it got to a point looking back on it that I sort of I was staring in that metaphorical mirror trying to make that decision. What do I want from life? Do I want to have another drink, or do I want to have a family? The good news is, of course, I made the right decision. I stopped drinking, felt amazing. Woke up in the morning with more energy, more joy for life, more focus, more time as well. That was the weird thing. I never thought I spent a lot of time drinking, but when I stopped, I realized just how much of it I had spent actually drinking, thinking about drinking, buying alcohol, justifying my drinking, complaining about not being able to drink, all of the good stuff. So I invested that time in doing something that I'd loved, like literally all of my life, which was writing. And I was quite involved in local government leadership at the time. So I wrote a book about local government leadership, which no one listening to this is going to want to read. It's like literally the most niche book ever written. But it was the start of my journey into kind of education and training and coaching. And I got quite successful at that. I got quite good at helping people to replicate the kind of success that I had had in local government leadership. And, you know, I got to another one of those moments, staring in the mirror. Not 4 a.m. anymore because I don't stay up that late. Although, to be totally honest with you, I did stay up till 4 a.m. last night watching the Super Bowl. But other than that, I do not stay up till 4 a.m. It was a cracking game, by the way. If you like American football, it was amazing. If you don't, it was like rugby with pads. Anyway, yeah, I had one of those kind of like staring in the mirror moments, and I realized that all I was doing with my life was helping people to replicate the success I'd had uh, in the past. And what was the biggest success that I had had in the past? By a country mile. It was stopping drinking, stopping smoking, stopping taking drugs, and sorting out my diet. So that's what I thought I ought to spend my time doing. So I trained with the Easy Way Clinic, which is the world's most successful stop smoking service, and that was amazing. I learned so much stuff. I've worked with hundreds of smokers every year, deliver loads of sessions, still do for them. It's an amazing organization. But, it wasn't really enough. I thought there must be more to it than that. And I wanted to find out some more. So I did the studying thing. I did some courses at Cornell University, did some stuff with the Chartered Management Institute, even spent some time in a windowless room in Peterborough. That's how thirsty I was for knowledge. And that was great and everything, but it wasn't really enough. So I wrote a couple more books, one called Get Over Indulgence and one called Real Men Quit, which are both a bit about my journey, but a lot more about how to get things that you don't want in your life out of your life. And that was cool, but it wasn't really enough. So then that was when I started kind of getting really obsessed with sobriety and what it is that keeps people sober. And that's when I started interviewing the sober superstars, finding out what they do, looking for the similarities and the connections. I also started doing a lot more kind of quantitative research. So we do a lot of stuff around alcohol's portrayal in the media, which I'm sure is something you're quite interested in. We also do a lot of stuff about what people struggle with when they get sober, that kind of 3 to 15 month period where they typically tend to have the most problems. We do a lot of stuff around there, and that's kind of cool, but it's not really enough. Which probably begs the question, what would be enough? I don't know is the short answer, but I imagine if alcohol-free options were as plentiful as alcohol options. If you could go to the pub and drink a glass of Perrier, nobody bats an eyelid, nobody says, "Oh, you sure you don't want some beer with that, mate?" That might be enough. If genuinely, when people said, "Let's go for a drink," they meant a cup of coffee rather than a beer, that might be enough. If we could change society so alcohol-free was the default option, and people looked at you a bit funny if you were a drinker. In essence, if we could turn alcohol into the way that smoking is perceived now, then I might get a cup of mint tea, a sci-fi novel, and put up my feet. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always found that sort of bizarre because it was never a drink. I remember going around to a former friend's house for his birthday, and he had a whiskey tasting um, night, and it wasn't a whiskey, it was 20 double shots, and then me crawling home, taking about an hour and a half to get the, I guess, 500 yards it was to my house and get up the stairs. It was never enough. It was still never enough.
Yeah,
Um,
I was exactly like that right from the start. And what I find really interesting is that a lot of people are like that, but not everybody who develops a problem with drinking is like that. But I was definitely, first time I ever really seriously drank alcohol, I drank just way too much and threw up everywhere. Felt awful in the morning. Said I was never going to do it again. That lasted for about a week, didn't it?
yeah, I mean, I started quite young because I was in the special school system. Behind the bike shed. So a lot of the kids didn't have the upbringing I had. Yes, I was brought up in a mining town that was failing because of Thatcher's Britain and the strikes and things like that. But my dad was a railwayman, and my mum works for social services, so they own their own house. I got whatever I needed, you know. But when I was sent to special school, these were kids that were seriously affected by, the mines and the loss of parents and divorce and things like that. I'd never heard of divorce before I went to that school. But I got bullied quite awfully to try and fit in. I would drink with them, and I remember it was truly a bottle of White Lightning, the strong white cider, and it was absolutely awful. It's like drinking toner, but I remember chugging that down, a full one, at about 10, 11 years old, and having no knowledge of the rest of the day and being very, very ill. But still, that's when it was still never enough. When you're walking into an AA meeting at 14, and the drink's not doing it for you anymore. So, you're a 14-year-old that's done coke, that's done smart crack wasn't really about back then. And it was always just not to be me.
Yeah.
I never wanted, I hated being me because I didn't know who I was anyway. So that's the whole thing. For me, addiction uh, masked my identity, it robbed me of identity, I guess, which I'm only now getting back within the 10 years 10 years this year that I've been clean and sober.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that I hear an awful lot, that we have pain in our lives and we want to escape from that pain. And I think that's actually quite a normal, natural part of being human. It's just we tend to take that to extremes, and that really does kind of get in the way of who you are. And I find this irony that a lot of the people that I work with, for them, they're like, oh yeah, but drinking is part of my identity. It's who I am. I am a drinker. I just had this lady yesterday, no, not yesterday, a couple of days ago, and she said to me, "Oh, I smoke because I'm a rebel." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. What are you rebelling against?" And she said, "I'm rebelling against a man." I was like, "Okay, great. You're rebelling against a man by smoking. Do you have any idea who owns tobacco companies?" And she just went, "Oh, it's the man, isn't it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm right. It's the man." It's like the most capitalist thing you can ever do is smoke. They're like all tobacco companies are owned by old white guys whose families have got links with slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Like, It's the most patriarchal thing you can possibly do. But you know, we convince ourselves that it's a part of who we are and it's a part of our identity. But it genuinely isn't, and it sort of actually masks our identity, and it stops us being who we are, and it stops us doing the great work that we've been put on this earth to perform. You know.
Yeah. I don't think I ever did anything to stand up against a man. I did it because I couldn't stop doing it. Smoking being a big one. You know, I was going through a pouch of tobacco every 2 or 3 days. Um, and then when that got really bad and money got really bad, went to vapes, which was the big thing at the time. And, there's nothing worse than walking through the high street and walking into a cloud of cherry smoke, or whatever, And I was addicted to that as much as, so I was puffing on that all day because it was more socially acceptable. And I couldn't stop. I'd stopped alcohol and everything like that. And I would say, smoking and coffee are my only two vices that I've got left, and I want to have, I want that right. I've given up so much in my life, and then, I had to give it up. So coffee is my only vice, really. But
it is the world's most widely traded drug, coffee. But we'll let we'll let you off with that. I still do indulge in the coffee myself, but no, I think that's so interesting because it is almost a trope in AA, isn't it? You know, like you go to AA for the coffee and the cigarettes, don't you? And then they tell you that like all drugs are bad, all drugs are terrible. You can't put any drugs in your body, but you want a cigarette and a cup of coffee.
yep.
Yeah, which of course is the irony. And I am on a little bit of a crusade against smoking. And I think it's so important that we make sure our kids don't start smoking and vaping because, like you smoked, right? I smoked. Most drinkers smoke. Most real heavy drinkers smoke. All injection drug users smoke. All problem gamblers smoke. All people who get really horribly addicted to stuff, apart from Facebook, tend to smoke. Well, we're on Facebook, aren't we? I'm going to get cancelled. I'm sorry, Mark. Forgive me. Anyway, so in general, people that get addicted to stuff, they smoke. And I sort of think, why is nobody talking about the common denominator here? It's not the person, it's not the individual, it's not even their circumstances that's got them addicted. One of the things that really does it is they start smoking and they start smoking young, or they start vaping these days, because that's what the kids do. And they do it young. And what it does is it creates an itch. It creates an itch you can't scratch. So you try and scratch it by smoking more, but it doesn't work. So you keep trying to scratch it by smoking more, but it don't work. So you start drinking, and then you keep trying to scratch that itch by drinking, but the itch just gets bigger and bigger. So you drink more and more and more, and then you think, well, why not? So you start trying to scratch it with drugs or gambling or sex or Instagram. Oh, they own that as well. What am I going to do?
I agree. I agree, and I'm bad for it. I'm a big phone user, a big Facebook user. My neighbour Thomas, one of my friends, is an old fella, but he takes me out and I'm sat there on my phone, and he'll say, "What are you doing?" I say, "I'm working." Working on Facebook, putting out clips like like I do with this or this and that, and he's like, "Well, can't you put it down? You're addicted to it." And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm working."
Yeah. Well, do you know what? I think that is one of the real difficulties. And I know an awful lot of sort of like self-employed creative people who are relatively small scale, love what they do, work really hard at it, do put some great work into the world. But they do often get into this trap of like spending hours a day on, oh, well, I'm a grown-up. I spend my time on LinkedIn. Yeah. So yeah, actually let's bash LinkedIn because that's Microsoft that own that is. So yeah, they spend all their time on LinkedIn, and there's like this irony that they spend all of their time on their phone on social media and they get no business out of it. But actually, they're almost there because the best way to get any business is to phone people up. But they don't phone people up. They spend their time
Mhm.
on their phone on social media and then wonder why they don't have any clients. And it's like, well, yeah, I know you like it is important that we put our message out into the world. It is important as creative people that we put our work in front of other people. And social media is a fantastic way of doing that. But it is also a fantastic way of draining 4 or 5 hours out of your day and achieving very little.
Yeah, doom scrolling, micro scrolling, whatever you want to call it, just sitting there, just thumb up, end up in hospital with repetitive strain injury on your thumb. A lot worse than sort of any game system would give you because, you're doing this for like 4 hours. Where at least if you're doing games on a thing, you're getting more movement, different movement. It's
Yeah,
it's
you're
the
using
trap
both thumbs.
using both of them. Yeah, it's a trap that we all fall into. But you know, it's I guess for a lot of people, for me at least, it's a coping mechanism. I guess. On the way I struggle with anxiety, so like on the way to school, on the school run, walking on the school run, there and back maybe. So I don't have to talk to anybody. It's I'll make a video for TikTok maybe, talking about trauma, um, or whatever. But it's a habit. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
there's a very fine line.
I don't genuinely agree with Freud about that many things, but I think he stated it fairly simply that as human beings, we will tend to run away from pain and towards pleasure. And in any of these behaviors that we end up trapping ourselves in, there is always an element of removing yourself from the pain and moving yourself towards pleasure. Now, you can get into whether that pleasure is actual genuine pleasure. You look like so. Like you take McDonald's. Somebody the other day told me they like the taste of McDonald's, and I was like, no, I don't think you do like the taste of McDonald's. McDonald's tastes like shit. What you like is you like the effect it has on your brain chemistry. That's what you enjoy. You don't enjoy the taste because the taste is just salt, fat, and sugar. It's not particularly pleasant, and it's all beige. You ever notice that about McDonald's? All the food is beige. So it's not the taste, it is the effect on your brain chemistry. So whether it's actual genuine pleasure or whether it's a way of manipulating the dopamine circuits and things like that in your brain that make you feel like you're getting some pleasure is a bit of a moot point. You either move towards pleasure or you move away from pain. And what almost anything that we do in life is going to have those characteristics in it. If you go to the opera, you are ultimately, well, partly you're trying to show everyone you're really dead clever. Partly you're just trying to, you know, um, entertain yourself, which is something that you enjoy, which is pleasurable, and it distracts you from the problems that you've got in your life. That is anything that distracts us and takes us out of that. Even Hamlet, it's exactly the same thing. It's just whether or not you take it to the point where it becomes a problem. And if you're going to see 6 operas in a weekend, that would be a problem. Either that or you've booked tickets for the Ring cycle. In general, though, most people don't do that. Most people don't end up reading the collected works of Shakespeare in a night, whereas we do end up rather overdoing it with drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, junk food, Facebook, because there's something a little bit more potent about them that affects our brain chemistry in a more severe way. And that's where you've got to be really, really careful. Are you doing it because it's genuinely enhancing your life, or is it slowly becoming your life?
Yeah, dopamine mining. It's I guess that's a big one for me. Um, because it's like you were saying about learning. like I'm on this learning kick, and I have been, since I started this really, but I love learning because I didn't learn at school. I left school with a certificate on riding a 50cc moped, answering a private telephone, counting to 100, and abseiling and climbing and things like that. Because special skills teach you just to fail, really, I guess. So I like to learn. Because I'm dyslexic and because I'm neurodivergent, I learn a bit differently. But because I'm an addict, I can't do it by halves. So I found this fantastic online resource. It was free education. And I did 36 courses back to back, 36 diploma courses, 4 advanced diploma courses, back to back, all while listening to books on emotional intelligence, addiction, and negotiation and things like that on Audible. To give myself a bit of an education, one of my closest friends is actually a negotiator, hostage and barricade negotiator. He started me out on this journey. He said you should do a podcast and you can interview me to start with. And we spoke about
negotiated that, did he?
He did, and he spoke about narcissism and talked with things about some of the people that were around me back in the day, and some of my family even. And I had this epiphany, this moment where I thought, I've got to learn about that. And so, the addict in me says, go more, go more, go more. The northerner in me and the man in me sometimes goes, slow down, slow down, slow down. So I'm constantly at this sort of battle, but I guess it's a problem with every neurodivergent person, every person that's been stuck in addiction. Because at the end of the day, addiction is disconnection. It's disconnection from life, disconnection from yourself, disconnection from family, disconnection from God. Faith means a great deal to me. I'm a man of faith. And when we find recovery, it gives us back that connection. This is part of it. And, connecting with other people through education is another. I believe that if we have lived a certain life like we have, it's a moral duty to educate. If you can teach. If you can't teach, well, teach, because we need good teachers and we need people, especially guys. It's hard work being a guy. But I don't think we talk about this a lot. Not a lot of people talk about it because there's a lot of taboo around that certain subject about being a guy, but it's difficult because we don't always know how to feel. We don't always know who to speak to. We don't always have people we can speak to. We don't always have that network. And it's, yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that's a very interesting point that you say we don't always have people to to listen to us. And I think, I like to make the point that actually men are not that bad at talking about their problems. The problem men have is they're not very good at listening to other men talk about their problems. And if, as blokes, we got better at listening to each other rather than just going, oh, yeah, shut up, drink your beer, the match is on, kind of thing, that would actually do much more good. I think most guys will talk about what's bothering them given the right environment. And that is a very big set of words, the right environment, because too much of the time, it's all friendly banter, and you just don't want to you don't want to display any kind of weakness in situations like that, because you know you're just going to get heaps. So there's like, we're not going to talk about any of my problems in situations like that. But you know, it can be as bad in the business world as well. You go along to these kind of networking events, and people will say, "Oh, like, how's it going?" And you can't say, "Oh, yeah, actually, my life is terrible. Everything sucks. I've got hardly any clients at the moment," because you're trying to sell stuff to these people. And if you
Mm.
don't come across like you believe in yourself, they're not going to buy anything off you, are they? So it creates all of this falsehood. And so much of the situations that we end up in, we end up kind of trapped, that we don't feel like we can talk to each other. But I think that the answer to that is really being better listeners, and offering each other, you know, support, instead of just like, you know, feeding into the myth that we've all got to be 110% all of the time.
Yeah, I talk a lot about emotional intelligence because it was a revelation for me. Um, there's a lot of stuff that I agree. There's some stuff that I don't agree with. Where it says that you can be street smart but not full on intelligent. I don't believe that's thing, because that's down to circumstance. And being street smart is down to adaptability, which is a big part now of emotional intelligence. I've been very lucky to have a lot of guests that are seen as macho men, as bravado men. And then I've sat and I've laughed with them and I've cried with them. These 20 stone guys, I'm a 17 stone guy, 6 foot one. Um, I sat there with men like Dominic Negus, ex, um, world champion, licensed and unlicensed boxer. Kevin Lane and Frank Potter, big names in the true crime sort of podcasting world. And I've sat and I've gone deep with these men, and I've sat and I've cried and I've opened myself up, and they've opened themselves up. And that's showing a great sort of shift in how people are thinking and how people are seeing. Because they're seeing these big blokes now, like talking about these problems that they're going through, and about mental health and addiction, which were all taboo. Even now, at certain points, it's still taboo. And there are not enough people that are out there like us. It is getting better with the TikTok generation, I guess, but that's still not good enough. We need to do more to promote better mental health in men and women, but especially men, because a good, a strong man is a good, emotionally and spiritually leveled man. Um,
And I mean, I think there's a lot of really good signs. There are a lot of really great men talking about sobriety, for example, and talking about their journey to, you know, away from alcohol. And that's like almost kind of whatever you're interested in. You know, there are plenty of musicians, film stars, actors, sports, you know, pick your sport, you know. You will always find at the top of any sport somebody who doesn't drink alcohol. And I think that's great, because it gives so many examples, so many role models to men to see, you know, these real strong guys that aren't drinking. And that is fantastic. But you've got to contrast that with just the whole of you know, the rest of the world, where they just associate alcohol with sports, for example. I mean, I know now a lot of alcohol companies are turning around going, "Oh no, we're not promoting irresponsible drinking among rugby fans or football fans." Of course not, because look, we're advertising our alcohol-free brands. It's like, yes, your alcohol-free brands that have got exactly the same names as your brands with alcohol in, and you're just trying to make yourself look better, but you're not really selling the alcohol-free version. You're selling the version with alcohol in because nobody drinks 8 pints of Guinness Zero a night. They might have two, and like genuinely, the alcohol industry's profit comes from people who drink too much, and nobody is going to drink too much if it's alcohol free. So no, you're not really selling that. Just like let's be straight about that. So there's still so much around how to so much around masculinity and alcohol, and so much just normalizing drinking, to the point that I was at a conference for addiction specialists, and there was it's great entertainment in the evening, and 3 times they made jokes about drinking. I'm like, they brief you about, like, I mean, to be fair, it was not all alcohol specialists. Some of them were smoking cessation people, but I would say 75% of the room wasn't drinking. And they were making jokes about have you had too much to drink, love? And it was just like, genuinely, like, where are you coming from? Although what made me laugh most about that was I would have loved it back in the day, because they'd put wine on all of the tables and no one drank it. So, like, the end of the evening, there was just all of these bottles of wine. If, like, back in the day, I'd have been round there, I'd be sorted, I'd have like a couple in my pocket on the way home. It would have been brilliant. But
Yeah, I mean, do you think that it's a little bit of, what do you call it, virtue signaling with these alcohol companies, or with the zero brands?
yeah, definitely. So it's bandwagon jumping, because they've seen that there is more demand for alcohol-free alternatives. So they want to sell where there's the demand. There's that. There's the whole idea, like greenwashing, like it makes them look more socially responsible. But at the end of the bend, what an alcohol-free version of like Heineken Zero, Guinness Zero, all that is what's called a line extension. And line extensions in the food business are not designed to sell a lot of the line extension. They're designed to sell more of the original. So
Mm.
why do you think Coke does Coke lime, Coke vanilla, Coke mango, Coke coconut, Coke? I don't drink enough Coke to know, but they do loads and loads of different varieties, don't they? They do that so they can increase the shelf space. Because if you stock Coke, you now have to stock all of the line extensions, which means you have to fill up even more of your shelf with the product, which squeezes out Pepsi, which squeezes out Dr. Pepper. So they're dominating more of the shelf space. And that is not to sell the line extensions as such. It's to sell more of the original product, so that their competitors have less space to sell their product, so more people will buy the original. And exactly the same thing is true of alcohol. If you put Heineken Zero on a tap on a bar, you now have two signs saying Heineken on that bar rather
Mm.
than one, and that pump has not got one of your competitors' brands on it either.
Yeah, I get that. I didn't think about it like that, but I get it now. You've explained it like that. Um, I do see a lot now that there are like people like us that are going out and they're designing bars that are alcohol free. Um, which I do think is a good idea. Um, you know, I'm going to be honest. I miss whiskey. Right, that was my drink. Whiskey was my drink. I really miss whiskey. Um, and if they do make an alternative that is alcohol free, would probably buy it. I don't know if they do. They may do. But it's it's not just the alcohol industry, though, is it? It's all the other industries that come off that. So the hotel and catering, industry, and then you've got the police on a Friday and Saturday night, and then those that have done it to deliberate excess. Then and that was me. I'll admit that was me. And then they're getting nicked, so that's the cost of being transported, put in a cell. You're paying 8 officers to get put one man in a cell to keep them. Then you've got to feed them while they're there, and if you're arresting 10, 15 people a night in every town, that's a whole business in itself.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, alcohol costs the British economy over 70 billion last year, something like that. Probably 53 billion of that was from lost productivity. So businesses lose about the same amount of money through lost productivity from drinking as they pay the government in corporation tax. Now, I know a lot of businesses are quite skilled at not paying corporation tax, but none of them are particularly skilled at helping their employees to get a more healthy relationship with alcohol, and they could make an awful lot of money if they did. But I mean, just to your point, yes, the cost of policing, the cost of to the NHS, the cost in terms of social care, it is enormous, and it just it's phenomenal. So various studies have been done around the amount that alcohol costs society and the amount of revenue that it brings in. And people go, oh, yeah, but I mean, the Scottish whiskey industry, if you made alcohol illegal, what do you think of all of the jobs that would be lost? Well, there's about 60,000 people that work in the spirits production in this country, and that is not a huge amount. That is a small number of people. That is probably less than the amount of people who are dealing with drunks on a Friday night, isn't it? And you go through all of the ills in our society. So murder, about 50% of murders are connected with alcohol. About 50% of violent crime is connected with alcohol. About 50% of domestic abuse is connected with alcohol. About 50% of sexual assault is connected with alcohol. Suicide, massively associated with alcohol. Like, what have you got? Like, anything that's wrong with our society, you can pretty much trace it back to alcohol. It's got some part to play in it.
It has, and I had this conversation with a guy not so long since, a guy by the name of Lee Marvin Hitchman. He's in a book called Born in Prison. He was born in prison, obviously, due to the title, and lived a life pretty similar to me, but like a lot worse. And we had this chat about just the damage that drink and drugs are doing to society, and the fact that they're illegal, and alcohol isn't. And think what you want about we've got like relapse prevention and harm reduction and things like that, but you do have places out there that help with recovery, that are not dry houses, that help you wean off. There are, in places like Amsterdam, places where you can go and you can use drugs. You can get them on prescription or whatever. You can buy them and you sign a waiver, and you have to go use them in a certain place, and they make sure that you're safe. Surely that, I believe abstinence is the way to go for me. Maybe people, I can't be so bold as to say it's best for everybody. But I think that decriminalizing things like weed, maybe, that's the one thing that triggers me, the smell. I hate it. But, places to go like Amsterdam, where you can go use it safely, like, you can't use it on the street, but you can use it in your own home, like in America and stuff. I think you know, that's a lot less harmful than um, the alternative now. But I think we've still got a long way to go, and I think we've got a lot of people to convince.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, there's so much in that. I think the idea, the sort of the Portuguese model, whereby you don't persecute users for having a small amount of drugs on them because that's totally pointless, is the best way forward. Anybody who is in the serious business of selling drugs, then nail them to the wall, in my opinion. Yeah, fine. They are proper criminals, deal with them. But people who have small amounts for their own personal supply, don't lock them up. Just say, we are here for you. And when you have decided that you want to stop using, we will still be here for you. Here is a safer way of doing it. Here is what you can do if you do want to cut back, or if you do want to get clean, and just like constantly telling them, not like we want to persecute you and we want to put you in prison and we want to take your drugs away. We tell them this very different message, that we are here for you. And I mean, in terms of moderation and alcohol, I think that is such an interesting area. Now, clearly, there are people out there who moderate their use of alcohol. But what I think is most interesting is that most people would describe themselves as moderate drinkers. And that's up to the kind of like 50, 70 units a week. If you drink 2 bottles of wine a day, there's no way you can describe yourself as moderate, but you probably only drink one on Tuesday. So you'd call it moderate, wouldn't you? Because it's only a bottle of wine, isn't it? And I think that word moderate is like the road to hell is paved with moderation. I think that there is a point where you go past where moderation just is no longer going to work for you, because you fundamentally change the way your brain reacts to alcohol, which means if you put any of it in, then you're going to be drinking all of it. The old AA adage that one is too many, 1,000 is never enough. I think that's true for some people.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we lack a really nice, crisp, precise way of measuring that at the moment. I think science is going to move us to the point where you can just have a brain scan and they'll go, no, no, mate, do it. That's it for you. You are done. So in the meantime, it puts us in this very difficult position that I don't want to like preach abstinence as the only way for absolutely everybody, because A, I don't think it is, and B, I think it really puts people off. And I don't want to put people off. I want to help people, and moderation is possible. And going from reasonably heavy drinking to moderation is possible. I've met people that have done it, but I've met more people who have tried to do it and ended up bloody miserable than I
Yeah.
have who've tried to do it and have made a success from it. So I wouldn't say it is impossible. I would just say it is difficult. And anybody who tells you it is easy is trying to sell you something, and you should not listen to them. And anybody who says that you can moderate your alcohol without an extended period of abstinence is also lying to you, because the science is pretty clear that you need to reset all of the systems in your brain before you attempt that moderation. If you just go from heavy to moderate, you will be back at heavy pretty quickly. So you've got to have that break, and you've got to have a really clear plan. And I talk quite a lot about bright lines, about mindfulness, about the different kind of techniques that you can use, which all effectively come down to actually being aware of what you're drinking, which is, of course, easy until you start drinking, because that is the effect of alcohol. It is a sedative, and it sedates your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that makes the decisions.
Mm-hmm.
That's the real truth about why moderating your consumption is hard. Because have one, and it will turn you into an idiot that wants a kebab.
Yeah. Well, I want a kebab anyway, but that's because I like food. But I do get you. I get what you're saying. It's I guess like I love AA and NA and GA and all these programs. Like I say, since I was 14, I'm now 47, coming up. So, I've been in and out of the program a long time. I don't personally use it at the moment. I use the program. I don't go to the meetings because the best thing about these anonymous meetings is they're full of anonymous people that are like you, and they're full of addicts and drinkers, and that's great. And the problem is, it's full of addicts and drinkers and people like you, and you get clashes, and it's difficult. And it is a great way to live, and there's a lot of wisdom there that's been tried and tested, since 1926, 1927. That started with a guy wanting to stop, and then, ringing directory inquiries and saying, I want to speak to someone who's got a problem with drink. And then them starting off this international movement that we call AA today. And that's great. It's a massive achievement. It's a massive achievement. I don't want to dig on that in any way. The programs for me, the meetings aren't. I personally get more from doing this and speaking about it and helping educate others, because it kills two birds with one stone for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We learn
But
something, and hopefully the people listening do too.
yeah, exactly. I get to do this cathartic exercise that helps me come to terms with the life that I've led, which I sometimes struggle with, because there's still guilt and shame there from some of the things that I've done in my past. I am learning that and grief, there's a lot of grief there as well. But I'm learning that guilt and shame and grief, you never really sort of move on from that, but we can move forward in our thinking. We can move forward in the way that we look at life, in the way that we learn, in the way that we teach, in the way that we speak, and the way that we do this, because it's just a constant um, cathartic exercise, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of time for AA. I'm pretty confident it would never have worked for me. It's just like there are a couple of things that really would have just stood in the way for me. The higher power thing, there's no way I would have got past that, for example. But I do recognize its immense power. In as far as I can give you examples of several people I know and love who would not be alive today if it was not for AA. So you've got to kind of respect it like that, haven't you?
I do.
And I mean, I think AA gets a bit of a bad rep in the recovery community. It kind of tends to be the poster child for dogmatic approaches to recovery. And I think that is a bit unfair because I have met people in every sphere of recovery who are incredibly dogmatic about that particular sphere of recovery. And I mean, I get that. I really do genuinely understand that. If you find something that changes your life as much as recovery, why would you not be in love with it? Why would you not just think it was the greatest thing ever? Why would you not become an evangelist for it? And I do genuinely understand that, but I think part of recovery is realizing the enormous strength and giving the gratitude to the system that got you free, but also
Mm.
realizing that it has its limitations and that the other systems out there also have something to offer to you. And once you've got to that point, you can become a bit like Bruce Lee, can't you? Because Bruce Lee started off in one tradition, but realized it didn't answer all of his questions. So he then went off and studied every other form of martial art and took from each form of martial art the bits that made sense to him and built his own martial art, and kicked a lot of asses on the way. And I think, you know, the recovery community is sort of the way martial arts were before MMA came along. You know, you've got all of the karate guys in one corner going on about how great karate is. You've got all of the boxers in another corner going on about how great boxing is, but none of them really know. You know what we need to do is get in the ring and fight it out. No, but we need to learn more about everybody else's approach and take from it what we can and build an approach that is best for us. And if you
Yeah.
want to go down the route of helping people to recover, then you need to pull together all of these resources and find out which one is going to work best for that individual. Because what I hear sometimes and what makes me most angry in this world is when people go, well, you didn't work the program. That's why you failed. You did not work through the system. And that's not just
Yeah.
AA. I've heard that said about a lot of other systems as well. You did not work the program. That's why you failed. And that is wrong. That is wrong. It is never the individual's fault. It is always the program's fault.
Mm.
That's what we need to say is, you know, if you are unable to recover, that is because we have not found the right system for you yet.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's a personal journey, and some of these journeys we take side by side with other people that are addicts and alcoholics. You know, as well as all addicts, isn't it? You know, and then some we go off. You know, for me, faith is a big part. You talk about higher power. Um, you know, that was always a big part of my life, even before recovery, searching for something, you know, falling into that religious trap. You know, religion is um, man searching for God, but actually, true core Christianity is paints a message. It's God searching for man, and I like that. Um, I like the fact that I'm not alone. I like the fact that, um, you know, when I feel that I can't do it, I can go, I surrender, I hand it over to you. Now, that's not for everybody else. I get that. People have different coping mechanisms, different strategies. Um, you know, I'm always interested in hearing other strategies. For me, creativity has been the biggest part of it, whether it be writing, acting, doing this, um, music, whatever. It's all been sort of based around creativity. I've been very lucky and blessed in the fact that, you know, I get to be one of those people that influence television and film portrayals of addicts and alcoholics to give it a more genuine um, feel. That's not always easy, you know. The first time I
But
got asked to.
it is so important because I don't know if you're aware of the work that Ted Perkins does. He's got a couple of fantastic books, Addicted in Film, and he's got a workbook that goes with that. And it's all about using films about alcoholism and recovery as a way of you know, increasing your understanding about your own recovery. And I just, as soon as I came across him, I was like, mate, that is absolute genius. Because so many people in early recovery feel like they've got too much time on their hands. And it's like, great, rent a film. Actually, rent a film, like you're going to go to Blockbusters. All right, you just get it on Netflix. But yeah, absolutely work through it and use it as a means of understanding your own problems because that's what art is for. You know, that is what creativity is for. It's to help you understand your life a little bit better. So I absolutely love the work that Ted does. But he'll freely admit that there's not that many great films out there about it. Partly because Hollywood is not that keen on getting to grips with it. It's not the kind of shiny image that they want to they want to portray. Occasionally, you'll get people like Nick Cage doing Leaving Las Vegas, but you know they're only doing that for the Oscars, aren't they? I mean, that's like nobody thought that was going to be commercially successful, did they? So I think it's such important work that you're doing to make sure there is more decent, well portrayed stuff out there, because it really can help.
It can. The first time I did it, you know, I spent years trying to get into film, trying to write film, and trying to get my own films made. And then when I gave up on that, I resigned myself to the fact that I'm never going to work in film. And I got sober, and I was about 18 months sober, and I got a message saying, "Can you come and speak to this director, please?" And I got to work on the Souvenir Part 1 and 2. That was funded by Scorsese, and it was an art house independent film that was A24, and it was great, and it was brilliant working with some of these big actors. But it was bizarre working with like the what do you call it, the art department, having to show them how to make cookers to cook heroin out of Coke cans, and dirtying up tinfoil and needles. And every time I've been brought in by companies to play whatever, I'm always getting typecast as an addict and things like that. And I think it's funny now. It was difficult to start with, and I got comfortable with it. We do need more films like that on a more commercial scale. At the end of the day, it's mostly the independent companies that are doing it. The films that have influenced me through my life are things like The Basketball Diaries, Leo DiCaprio. What else? Even things like Gang Related and Gridlocked, Tupac's last film. All independent, but all jump into the murky world that is addiction, and they don't compromise on it, and they show you how it is. There are not many filmmakers out there that will do that. They'll quite happily show you the gory. They'll quite happily show you the sex, because there's nothing better than being on set, in a close set. And there's a scene being filmed. You've never seen so many people standing around watching it for a close set. It's they will quite happily film that. They will quite happily talk about other taboo subjects, but they won't jump in to the deep and murkiness that is full on addiction. They'll show you people getting drunk, and they'll show you people doing dope or whatever, but they won't show you the full journey that it takes, the prisons, the institutions, the death, destruction. That's left out of people like us that go, let's make a film.
Yeah.
That's sad.
And I think I don't know whether you watched Painkiller on Netflix recently, which is it's kind of the Netflix answer to Dope Sick, but it was about OxyContin, but it wasn't really about OxyContin. It was about the Sacklers, and it was putting the boot into the Sacklers, Purdue Pharma, all the people that caused the opioid epidemic in America. Like, great, Keen, you're putting the boot in. But it was very manicured, the way they showed the people that had a problem with it. And they wanted to, I guess they would say they wanted to show it in the most sympathetic way, which meant that they didn't really get to grips with that more traditional journey from oxy to fentanyl and all the way down, that particular rabbit hole that a lot of people have gone to. But what really struck me about it, to the point that we actually did a 1 minute interval coding study on it. When I was watching it, I realized there was an awful lot of people drinking in it. So we did this 1 minute interval study, and there's actually more scenes of people drinking alcohol in that thing than there is of scenes of people taking OxyContin. And there is, I don't know whether it was I'm pretty sure it was intentional, that they contrasted the people taking Oxy with the people at Purdue Pharma celebrating. But of course, the way they portrayed them as celebrating involved them drinking alcohol. So they actually had this ironic kind of like juxtaposition of people taking Oxy and people taking alcohol, and us thinking these guys are the scumbags, these guys are the drug addicts, and these guys are the corporate success story.
Yeah, and that Dogs film all the way through, especially in the sort of big industry, and watching the award shows, and they're all sat there drinking. You know, I remember the first time I got put into rehab, I was forced to watch Nil by Mouth. Imagine being a young guy being put into rehab and then given that as a sort of a short, sharp shock. You know, all that made me think was, oh, I'd like to make a film like that one day. But you know, we need more films like that. It's great to be able to go and get yourself out of your head and into a different space and watch film and go and see it in the cinema or sit there and watch it on, you know, on your telly, on Netflix or whatever your flavor is, you know. But it needs to be more, I won't say regulated, but it needs to, you need more people like us to go in and go, this is the way it is.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm honestly, I think it does need to be regulated, because there is an awful lot of portrayal of smoking and drinking on. I'm going to call Netflix out because that's the one that we've done most of the research on. They're the ones that got into trouble with the British Medical Journal in 2019 when a study published in the BMJ, you know, like proper stuff, not Wikipedia, found that 74% of their Netflix original shows branded 15 and 18 had smoking in it. And it's just like, that's ridiculous. You know, if you look at the same period of time on the BBC, it's like 7.4%. It's like an order of magnitude different. And that's because the BBC actually has policies about portraying smoking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to put smoking into a drama, you have to fill out a ton of paperwork. And that's more the kind of thing that we need, because it's this kind of unregulated promotion of alcohol and cigarettes that are causing so much harm. Whether it's funded by the alcohol industry or the tobacco industry, I don't know, because I don't have Netflix accounts. I just think it's suspicious how much of the time powerful people and sexy people are drinking alcohol.
Mm. Yeah, and rich people are shown smoking cigars, and poor people are shown smoking roll-ups. I mean, you know, on both of the souvenir films that I worked on, it showed, you know, the director didn't want to show full-on usage within the film. She wanted to go for a certain certificate, wanted to hit a certain studio, which is fair enough. I get. And you know, it was set in the 80s, and as you say, where there's addiction, there's drinking, and where there's drinking, there's smoking, and you know, so I get that. So there was a lot. You know, you watch these films, and pretty much every other 2 or 3 scenes, you see somebody smoking, because that's the way that it you know. But I get that. And filming that, you know, you're smoking stuff like marshmallow plants and stuff like that, non-addictive, and you know, it's still giving you a chest infection at the end of the day because you smoke so much. Because every time you reset, they give you a new one. You know, now I know why Cillian Murphy doesn't smoke, because of his time on Peaky Blinders, and you know why Gary Oldman doesn't smoke, because of his time on what was it, Churchill, giving himself tobacco poisoning.
Yeah,
you know, nicotine poisoning. It's mad, and it's not regulated. You can go, you know, if you want to smoke on film, they can supply normal cigarettes.
Yeah, yeah. So I talk a lot about cigarette advertising when I do sessions, and people look at you funny when you say cigarette advertising. They're like, "Oh, I don't." So, and I talk a lot about Bridgerton, which is a particular Netflix
Yep.
series. I talk about it because it was set in 1815, and there's some scenes of people smoking what amount to like pre-rolled cigarettes, which of course didn't exist until the 1890s. And that's one of the reasons why I pick on it. But I was riffing off about it, and this guy said, "Oh, I was an extra on Bridgerton. I wondered why they were handing out cigarettes like they were candy." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. So thanks very much. That kind of proves my point, doesn't it?" But yeah, I mean, it's just part of the problem that we have around everything, particularly alcohol, but cigarettes as well, just being such a socially acceptable thing, just being such a part of life. People don't even realize that it's a thing. They don't even notice it anymore. It's like fish swimming in water, except of course we're swimming in beer and whiskey and wine.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's something that we need to look more into, and I think this conversation has sparked me into wanting to look into it more and see what I can do actually in the film and theatre industry to actually not only bring a more authentic um, uh, way to them making stuff, but also to offer help because you've got grips and people working on the sets getting through drinking cans of Monster or whatever the drink taurine filled grips working from 7 o'clock in the morning to 12 o'clock at night. They're long days,
Yeah.
and then when they're not filming, they're smoking and they're
Yeah.
drinking
So
coffee and that.
one of the things that is a particular risk factor for alcohol abuse is that kind of those very difficult shifts, often away from home, which is something that I'm sure you get in the film industry quite a lot. The people I know who work in that kind of industries, that's what tends to spark the problems for them, and that's not unsurprising. And then add on the top of that the kind of all of the rubbish about how you've got to drink and smoke to be creative, which that's possibly a subject for another podcast. But before I shoot off, if I did happen to have a couple of million quid handy, you need more than a couple of million. All right, let's say I've got 20 million quid. What would I be greenlighting you for? What would be your big project?
Well, it wouldn't cost you 20 million quid. I'm currently working on something at the minute. I grew up um, around the work of a man called Alan Bennett. Now, Alan Bennett is a famous Leeds-based playwright. Leeds is like 20 miles away from where I grew up. And he did this series called Talking Heads. And it started as, it was a nice story. They got people of the day like Thora Birch and not Thora Birch, Thora Heard, even. Thora Heard and other people. And they remade it during the pandemic because it's just one person in a room. And I've kind of built my career on that film in that improvised stuff. But this is like, it'll start off as a nice little story that sounds funny and you know, um, it sounds nice and then it goes darker. Well, I'm part of a group of people that have lived lives of losing people to murder and suicide and addiction and things like that. So what I would do is this series, and as a matter of fact, if I do make it, Chesney Hawkes has agreed to do the theme tune, um, which is
You've got to have
yeah,
a big name
uh,
connected. That's important.
you have. I initially asked him to play a part in it, and he said, "Well, acting's not for me anymore." He did Buddy's Song, that's one of my favourite films, but he said, "I will write the theme tune for you if you ever make it." Um, and I've promised his son a part. And it would be these, I guess, 30-minute episodes, possibly put together to make a film as well, a couple of films maybe. And it would start off as a normal sort of story, but it would go into some darker, but it would be true. So it would be about men like Kevin Lane, about how I quit crack cocaine, sat in a crack house at 10 o'clock at night. You know, it would be about people like Eugene Scardifield, who lost his brother to murder, and his battle that him and his mum have gone through. It would be about people, you know, that have gone through the mill and found a way through the other side. That is my dream project. If you've got about, I don't know, £100,000, I'll make it.
Oh, I've got
Have a
about
full
100,000
series.
pence.
Yeah. If it was
No,
a
but
film,
it sounds great, man. I do hope you get that green lighted. That sounds like a fantastic project.
yeah. If it was a film, it'd be, I don't know, it'd be something similar, but it would be full on about addiction and boxing, I guess, because I love both. Um, but yeah, thanks for coming on, mate. It's been a pleasure. I would love to do this again. I think we've got a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think we could look, I mean the media the media has got an awful lot to answer for, so we could make them
Yeah,
answer for it a little bit more.
yeah, brilliant. Um, Thanks, guys, for tuning in as always. I see there's a few people that have been in and out tonight. More than usual, actually, which is great. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I shall see you again next week about this time. And thanks for all the support that you give me. And I shall see you again soon. Cheers, guys.